This is from the Duke of Brunswick, who is the head of World Freemasonry, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And he wanted to disband World Freemasonry. And the reason why he did that is because he knew that it had been infiltrated by the Illuminati, by satanic, Luciferian principles.
Uh-huh.
And here's what he got up and said. This is his own words. This is the Duke of Brunswick. He says, I have been convinced that we as an order have come under the power of some very evil occult order.
Huh.
Profoundly versed in science, both occult and otherwise, though not infallible, their methods being black magic. That is to say, electromagnetic power, hypnotism, and powerful suggestion. We are convinced that this order is being controlled by some sun order after the nature of the Illuminati, if not by that order itself. So here is the top Mason in the world at that time literally telling us that when he's talking about black magic, he is not speaking about some witch doctrine. He's speaking specifically about electromagnetic power, hypnotism, and powerful suggestion.
He did say, those are exact words.
I have it in the book, and I have these quotes like this in the book from top Masons warning their own order. George Washington also warned his own order about these forces, that they were using this kind of power. Now, if it's that old, think how sophisticated they are today.
One thing that has been amazing to me, and it is an ever-widening gap. It is absolutely outstripping us. It's not even a race. And the question on the back of your book puts it very succinctly. Why has our technological expertise far outreached our psychological and spiritual development? It's a key question, but let me tell you, folks, on an hourly and daily basis, technology is leaping so far ahead, it's almost as if we have our feet glued to the ground. Nanotechnology exploding all over the planet. We are literally on the threshold of stepping into realms where I don't feel as a species we really have any right to go because we're not competent enough anymore to take care of it. It's going to be misused and abused like everything else is. And that's why I hear the clock ticking in the background. Mm-hmm. Tick, tick, tick.
Well, the combined military expenditures of all the world's governments, that's just in 1987.
Yeah.
Let's not even bother with what we're doing with the billions for this war, but just in 1987, folks, the combined military expenditures of all the world's governments was so large that all of the social programs of the United Nations could be financed for 300 years. So let's forget about, all the starving millions, and we haven't got money for this, and we haven't got money for that, and we haven't got money for the indigenous people in America who are starving right outside our own doors. Yeah, we do have the money for that. We have the money here to fund all of the programs of the United Nations for 300 years, but we better ask some serious questions here. Why is it all going to technology? Why is it all going to the military? It's not just because of enemies. These enemies are designer enemies. They've been created on paper for us.
Of course.
They have as much reality.
They're cartoon characters.
Exactly. So then, what is this big dialectic that's been playing itself out? If you don't have Catholics, you have Protestants. If you have black, you have white. If you have reds, you have the blues.
Divide and conquer.
Right. And it's been going on for a very, very long time, all the way back to the ancient dynasties. Mm-hmm. The symbolism, as Jordan Maxwell has shown, proves this. The double-headed eagle of Freemasonry, the triangle with its, the whole idea of the dialectic. This is something that's been set in motion on the human race many millennia ago, and we are now in the end game. We are reaching the point of the ending. And that can either be in our favor, if we grasp to the truth, the roots of what is real, or we can be completely, brushed aside as unimportant. Mm-hmm. Now, in my book, I talk about how the Nephilim are planning to vacate this planet. They've had difficulty doing that for many thousands of years. And the Tudor dynasty in England was set to use some powers set to subjugate the whole world, which is why we have a thing called the British Empire, which basically was through the Hudson Bay Company and the East India Company and these different organizations. These are the individuals who wanted to subjugate the earth in order to build the technology that they had lost in the Great Pole Shift, because you can't have a pole shift on this planet and then have 5 continents sinking beneath the oceans and have all of the computers and the hardware and the spaceships all intact. That all got destroyed many thousands of years ago. So the idea of these Nephilim was to regroup, which is what they did in the Sumerian, Babylonian area of Asia Minor, because that was the new equator. And they set themselves up in this place that was the only place that could sustain life all the year through. And basically, that's where we have the rise of what we call the historical empires, AD. They come from these periods about 7 to 10,000 years ago, but move up until the Industrial Revolution. We have had a consistent program of moving mankind forward so that they can rebuild the sophisticated technology and hardware. But it has an occult agenda. You only have to look at the symbolism that these companies use to know this. And if you do a little bit of homework, in my book I've got all the information on this, that the technology of the world is not new. It is a very old science, and it has the most serious impact for the human race. And we need to have this. We need to have the answers, and we need to have them now.
What do you think about the those who propose that the globalists and Illuminati, the modern-day Nephilim, have as an agenda for us is to reduce the world population by 80%?
They've always been doing that. That's not a new thing. They've the campaign against womankind, for instance. In the book, I talk about the suppression of women. Do you think that it's only in recent times that they rose up, under the Dominican order and they, perpetrated the witch hunts? Oh my God, the crimes against the women have been done for thousands of years because of a particular crime that was done by women against these Nephilim approximately 30,000 years ago. Then they had the Black Death. If you read William Bramley's Gods of Eden, he absolutely conclusively proves in that book that the so-called Black Plague was created artificially. We have AIDS that Dr. Robert Strecker has conclusively proved was man-made. We have in Ireland the famine. How come there was never a famine before and there's never been a famine since? My research in Ireland took me into the field to discover that the famine was orchestrated by the elites of the British government in order to so impoverish and annihilate the people that they would then be motivated, because it's not easy to get European people, nor is it easy to get Irish people to leave their home. It's not something that people do naturally. To do that, you've got to precipitate such absolute horrors that people will then come to the New World, America, to push the wheel over here to get the country jump-started. But you can't do that without incredible utopian philosophies, the intellectuals disseminating this fake utopian philosophy on the one hand, so that intellectuals will buy into it, and then to get the Johnny Jack from the street in order to go over, you've got to make life so unbearable for him in Europe, which is exactly what the plan was. And then you lay on these $1 million ships to get them to come over to the United States. Wait a minute. You don't have money to feed them or bring them cartons of food, but you have money to put them on these expensive vessels and ship them over to the New World? Is there something wrong with this picture?
Something's really wrong with the picture.
Right.
Famine, look what Stalin did to in Ukraine.
200 million. Yuri Lina?
I don't even know.
I saw on your website you carry a book by a fantastic scholar. He's a friend of mine called Yuri Lina. Yuri Lina was one of the top men on the KGB hit list. He lives in Europe now, and he wrote a book called Architects of Deception, which goes into this whole thing about the real crimes of Stalin, And
Stalin. Well, we figure 50 million plus. I don't know. We'll never know.
Yuri Lina, who's an expert in this, and he was hunted. This man was literally hunted by the KGB throughout Europe. He says that the figure is a massive 200 million, all in all, through Lenin, from Trotsky, Lenin, and Stalin. Taken all, the genocide of Russia has been untold. Like Anthony J. Hilder knows, the history of Africa. The massacres that have taken place there is another a dark, shadowy page of history. The true occult history of Africa has never been told. The true occult history of Ireland has never been told. The true occult history of America has never been told until now. These individuals we're talking about have never had a proactive kind of opposition. How could they? Your forefathers and mine were trapped to their feudal villages. It was literally a crime to stray more than 5 or 10 miles from outside your own village. Right? This is recent history. 2 generations back, our parents didn't even have the luxury of going to school. Right? My father remembers when he barely went to school in Ireland, So we are only now coming up to be any kind of real intellectually empowered opposition. But I just heard Alex Jones. He's right. The Third World War is on its way. I mean, Ariel Sharon, the president of Israel, in 2002, he said, World War III is coming, whether you like it or not. The 9/11 attacks were just the beginning. Now, wait a minute. That's no conspiracy theorist. That's Ariel Sharon, the head of the Zionist factions, who are busy day and night working on this strategy, and who basically control the American government.
Basically.
There's the man telling you from his horse's mouth that World War III is on its way.
No, they're not. Again, they're not hiding anything. No. They are telegraphing everything they're going to do.
Right, and we're just so dumbed down.
Yeah.
I don't know what's wrong with people.
Well,
I
so
do know what's wrong.
Desensitized, they can't figure it out, and they don't. Look, it's too easy. The history, Michael Cremo, The Hidden History of the Human Race, one of the great titles of any book ever. The Hidden History of the Human Race is so enormous. It is so absolutely fantastic that most people would just dismiss it. They couldn't handle it.
Well, can I tell you something very interesting?
Yeah, we have about a minute.
We have a minute. Well, it's hard to get into, but Remember we were talking about whether the real original Nephilim are alive or not?
Yes.
Or whether it was their bloodline? The end of my work shows that the reason it's precipitating the end game is because, in fact, the tombs of some of these individuals, these ancient beings, are in Iraq and in Babylon. And there's a program to disinter some of these ancient beings and reawaken them genetically.
I've heard there are things going on there that have to do with our ancient past.
Right.
I don't know specific knowledge what it is, but there are other things at play there.
Right. And we're going to be seeing something very interesting happening, which has a lot to do with prophecy. In the book and in the DVDs, I go into this. People can contact me if they need any more information. Really a lover of knowledge. That's what philosophy means. It's a lover of wisdom, a lover of knowledge. It's not my position to point to individuals.
Right.
Certainly I can point to their scholarship. And for instance, Zacharias Sitchin, God love him, he's done some fantastic work. But I'm just using him as a case in point now to illustrate to your listeners what we're talking about here. In that man's work, he specializes only in the Babylonian Sumerian record. There is almost next to no cross-referencing with all the other mythologies of the world, which is needed to be done. Here you are studying a thing that is mythology. You need to cross-reference your findings with the Aryan, with the Indian, with the African, with the Mayan, with the Celtic. And he does not do this. He's found out wonderful things, but you must cross-reference it because there's glaring errors in some of the work that needs to be erased. And if he had done this cross-referencing thing, which many scholars have who came before him, then they would have tidied up some of the more erroneous areas regarding the planet X and regarding Atlantis and regarding the Anunnaki and what have you.
Right.
My work is comparative. You compare all the religions because, as Immanuel Velikovsky knew, and as Commons Beaumont understood, they're all saying the same thing. They're all the eight races of the ancient world were referring to the same series of events, the same, events that took place throughout this planet. And the times may look different when we interpret them, or the poetic language, especially in Celtic Ireland. Why do we think that when people read my book, they have such a shock and thinking that the Celtic record has such an incredible archive of knowledge about these matters? Because it's always been put before us as fairy folk tales, a magical tradition, something not to be taken seriously. And here's one of the most powerful archives of knowledge, the Arthurian and Celtic tradition, that talk about the war of the gods, the coming of evil into the world, the subjugation of women, the fall from grace, the fall from truth. All of that is in there. That they talk about super weaponry, advanced weaponry. They talk about genetic manipulation. It's all there for the eye to read.
Yeah, but nobody knows that. They don't study.
Because it's been put before us habitually as either fiction or something that's not worth serious consideration. These people have a lot to hide. They have inserted fallacious ice ages, millions of years in length between us and our ancestors, because they're desperate. There's a cabal in this world that is absolutely desperate. We know about different secret agendas, but what people need to realize is that there's a mega agenda coming down to us from about 50,000 years ago. It is imperative for the forces that control this planet to not let us understand where we actually come from, that we have had high civilizations, just like Gerald Hancock and others are now discovering. But Velikovsky and Beaumont and many writers from the 19th century had already been discovering this. And Velikovsky's work is absolutely important because he said that, look, the Mayans maybe use a Venusian calendar or a lunar calendar. The Celtic people over here use a tree calendar. Everyone uses a different calendar, so of course they're dating it in their own secular time at a different time. But let's not mistake the fact that these catastrophes happen at the same time.
Right, and every culture, just to repeat what Michael said, has at its ancient basis a catastrophe. There's always one there. Now, how far, we go back somewhere between 11,500 years and 12.5, where Edgar Cayce, of course, and so many others, and the geological record now shows something catastrophic happened. But that was not the only ancient catastrophe. That was one.
Now, in my book, and that's exactly right, there are two catastrophes. Of course, in the millions of years our planet has been here, there's obviously, you can't refute that. There has been a lot of travesties and upheavals, but the two that very much affected or influenced our actual history are very recent in time. In history, they're very, very recent. And one was the famous deluge, but that happened about 50,000 years ago. And then there was a polar shift, a polar axial shift that was happening about 13,500 years ago. And what your audience needs to understand is what we've discovered. and I talk about extensively, is that the science is now in to prove that Atlantis existed, and this comes from orthodox official science from Oxford and Cambridge University, and from the MIT, to prove that not only Atlantis existed, but there was cataclysms in the very recent past, and that there was this polar shift that sank the continents of the ancient world.
Indeed. All right.